Coming up on the NESN Bruins podcast, we look back at the Bruins' second round victory over the Columbus Blue Jackets, and we preview the Bruins' return to the Eastern Conference Finals and a matchup with don't call them the Hartford Whalers, the Carolina Hurricanes. That's coming up and a whole lot more, so let's just hit the music and get out of here. Hey everybody, welcome into the NESN Bruins podcast. I'm NESN.com's Mike Holt, joined as always, yet again, by NESN.com's Logan Mullen. And we are here to not only look back on the Boston Bruins' second round defeat of the Columbus Blue Jackets, but we're here to preview the Eastern Conference Finals.
Happening tonight.
Yeah, starting, Thursday, as they say
right.
in podcast parlance. So we don't know if somebody's going to be listening to this yesterday, tomorrow. I guess, it doesn't really matter because by the time whatever we talk about today has a shelf life of about 5 hours.
True.
But that's life in the
it is current as
in
of
the podcast world.
Today, Thursday, May 9th at
10:11
a.m.
Yeah, rare morning game for us. Thank you by the way, for coming in before you jet over to the Garden tonight.
Oh, of course.
To spearhead.
Of course.
Or are you at
Usually
the Garden tonight? Yeah.
I am at the Garden. Usually I'm in sweatpants drinking coffee right now.
Tough life. So the Bruins are advancing. We, for the first time since 2013, the Eastern Conference Finals have returned to Boston. Third time since 2011. A little bit of a different path getting there this year. It feels just I was talking to NESN.com's Ricky Doyle about this earlier this week, and it is kind of just weird if you look at the path for which the Bruins have taken to get here. Very odd. Not really kind of how you draw it up, especially what it could have been. Yeah. Toronto, that one makes sense. But now Columbus and Carolina, pretty weird.
Yeah, it is going to be weird, and I hope it doesn't. I mean, if the Bruins advance, I hope the fact that they played two wild card teams in the latter rounds of the conference section of the postseason doesn't minimize the accomplishment, because we were talking about this right beforehand that they played the Blue Jackets and Bruins in 6, which I accurately predicted was a bit of a conservative call, but it's also like the Blue Jackets had just finished dump trucking the Tampa Bay Lightning, and it's the same thing. I mean, we knew all season, pretty much all season, I'd say since November, that the Metropolitan branch of the playoffs or of the postseason bracket was going to be a lot easier than the Atlantic Division stretch. So, not to take away what the Hurricanes have done, but the Islanders were kind of a weird 1 seed or whatever they were they a 2 seed? The 3. They slipped to the 3, right?
They were the 2 seed.
They were the 2 seed, okay. But they knocked off the reigning Cup champions, too, in the Capitals. So it's not an accident that these teams are here. I mean, they're good teams. It's just easier to dismiss them because of the route that the teams the Bruins have played got to the postseason as well.
Yep, it is what it is. It is interesting. We're getting way ahead of ourselves, especially within the schedule of our own podcast here. But if the Bruins find a way to get through Carolina and end up playing like St. Louis in the Cup, it really is. I was talking to Ricky about this the other day. Like, if you look at the playoff field right now, I think only the Bruins, or maybe not. No. Like, if you go back to December 31st, all the teams left except for, let's see, who's left? Maybe San Jose, I think, were like 14th or worse in the entire NHL.
Yeah, it was.
Like the Blues and the
were dead
Hurricanes
last.
Especially were like the two of the worst teams. They've been the only teams, we'll get into this a little bit more too, the only team with more points than the Blues or Carolina after January 1st was Tampa Bay. Like the two teams that were like left for dead who just got red hot.
Well, I was thinking about that too. I was thinking back to one of our pre-trade deadline podcasts. We were talking about poaching Michael Furlan from Carolina, and now they're going to be seeing him in the conference finals, which is just the damnedest thing. Yeah.
Sports. All right, before we get into the conference finals, let's do a quick assessment of the second round. Bruins, as you mentioned, and as you correctly predicted, get by the Columbus Blue Jackets in 6 games. I thought it was a terrific series. It was awesome. Like I enjoyed that style of hockey more than I enjoyed the first round. It felt more like a playoff series. I'm
on the same page.
Despite the fact that you would think like Bruins, Maple Leafs, the rivalry or whatever, the in-division play would have ratcheted it up. It never felt as nasty as like 10 minutes into Game 1 of the Columbus series.
Right, save for Game 2 with Kadri. Pretty much everything in the Columbus series was more entertaining than the Maple Leafs one. And yeah, it is kind of weird to say that, but I think it's just the style of play that they had, the Bruins and the Blue Jackets, that is just, it's more prototypical postseason hockey. It's not, we're going to try and match speed with the Maple Leafs, and it becomes purely about skill. I mean, there were bodies getting thrown everywhere. I mean, Brad Marchand did a good job agitating Cam Atkinson right out of the start. And so even, Riley Nash turned into a quasi-villain until he got sidelined, which was a weird thing.
Which started with just an absolutely bone-crunching hit from Zdeno Chára.
Right.
Like, there was 5 or 6, not even counting like the Charlie McAvoy hit that got him suspended for Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, which we'll touch on in a little bit. 5 or 6 hits that really stand out as just like wallop.
Yeah.
Like some big-time guys just throwing away.
Torey Krug lighting up Bjorkstrand,
So that was physical series, ice bag series. But
I think it's encouraging in the sense that the Bruins showed that they can compete against two very different types of teams. And to a degree, I guess to walk that back a little bit is with the Maple Leafs, there were times that the Bruins purely tried to match speed, and that didn't work out so well for them. But they beat two very different kinds of teams, and I'd say the Hurricanes kind of trend more towards the Toronto Maple Leafs style of play than the Columbus Blue Jackets, which could create some problems for the Bruins. But again, it's all about tone setting, right from the beginning.
I think, the one thing, to kind of jumping off your point with the Bruins being able to match those two styles or play the two styles or neutralize, however you want to put it, a lot of that, I think, is because of the play of Tuukka Rask. And it makes it easier to kind of take what the other team gives you or play their style or try to do whatever you need to do to kind of neutralize that when your goalie's playing out of his mind. And he's playing, I know, I took some flack for this, and he was really good in the Pittsburgh series in 13. He was good in the New York series in 13. He was good at times in the Cup final against Chicago. But this is, it's just his confidence as I've seen him play, especially in the playoffs, I think throughout his entire career, where it's not like Tim Thomas in 2011, but he's obviously a different style of goalie, and the fact that he doesn't look like Thomas in 2011 is probably the most encouraging thing.
Right.
He's on his angles. He's moving as well as I've seen him move laterally. Like it just looks just very confident, very calm, very quiet.
Yeah, and people don't address that enough when talking about what Tim Thomas did in 2011 is while he had some tremendous performances and made a number of great saves, a lot of those saves were made from the fact that he was doing things wrong beforehand and that he got caught, 3 feet out of his crease.
The great irony is that Roberto Luongo was right about
his
criticisms of Thomas. It just, you got to back it up and not give up 6 goals in Boston and then have Thomas play out of his mind as well. We saw that in 2011 with Thomas, where like even Game 1 of the Stanley Cup final, kind of all over the place. You're not getting that from Rask, obviously. He hasn't even had a bad game yet. Like it's hard to, like, you even go back to last year, like Game 7 he was just atrocious.
Yeah,
like you
go
thankfully
back to, so was Frederik Andersen.
Right. You go back to 13, there were a couple of games mixed in there, especially against Chicago, which is against a dynastic team.
Right.
So whatever, but he hasn't had a stinker like that. In fact, he's been the exact opposite. Was he given up 1 goal over his last 2 road games, and one of them was a garbage goal. That 1 goal it shouldn't have counted. So I thought it's good to see him get that shutout. I think when he's playing like that, it gives the rest of that team just so much confidence because it's just one less thing you have to worry about.
Yeah, he had some pretty impressive stretches during 2013, and maybe I'm letting recency bias cloud my judgment, but I feel like this is the best I've ever seen him play.
I think there was probably I rushed to judgment and said that the Game 4 performance was the best of his career, and maybe it wasn't. He had like a 55 save game mixed in there, but I think like in terms of sustained for going on 3 or 4 weeks now is probably the best we've ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's just it really is the comfort level is clear, and I think we're also seeing the decision to give Jarro Halak a lot of looks during the regular season start to pay dividends. Rask even alluded to that at some point during the Columbus series, that it's like he feels rested, like he feels fine. And how many times did we see the Bruins? What was it, the year that they played the Senators and got bounced in the first round, they played like an inordinate amount of games.
20.
Yeah, that was 2017. Yeah, but there was one season which currently escapes me where Rask had played somewhere close to 70 games, I think. And it's just like that's tough to do.
Yep.
And so I think that was for all the decisions that Don Sweeney made this offseason, it was incredibly prudent to pick up a backup who actually is good. And not to say that Anton Khudobin wasn't and that they couldn't have done a similar thing with Khudobin, but being able to, Halak has started for many teams over the course of his career. It's like he could have started for the Bruins. He did start for the Bruins for prolonged stretches. So I think we're starting to see that actually ended up paying off. And I don't want to put all of his success on rest, but it certainly can't be hurting.
Yeah, it's a combination of a lot of things. I think he's maturing as well. I think the fact that you're getting the young defenseman to step up and play really well, like a coming of age series for a guy like Brandon Carlo. McAvoy continues to look like the player we all expected him to be, so that's good. I guess my other big storyline coming out of the Columbus series is where your level of confidence is right now with the Bruins top line. I think it started to maybe turn a little bit toward the end of that series where Pastrnak, who looked just lost
I'm still not convinced he isn't hurt.
Okay. Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like, and I heard even a talk radio caller suggest or somebody, maybe as a host, I don't know, somebody suggest or mention it's funny how all the whispers about the injuries went away real fast once he started playing well, but it's maybe just one of those things where he's found a way to manage it a little bit better. I don't know. But it is encouraging that those guys finally started to wake up a little bit.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how Carolina matches up with them, because it's the first line. My thing the entire time was that the first line wasn't scoring, but they also weren't giving up tons of chances either. So it really felt like they were just being neutralized. Mm-hmm. So it was, in Toronto they were getting neutralized by the Tavares line. Columbus, I guess it was the Duchesne line that they saw a lot.
Yeah.
But they got looks with both of those top six groups. But they've been shut down. As long as they're defensively responsible, that's kind of all you can ask for in some senses, that it's okay, they're not scoring, but at least they're not giving up a ton of chances. Now, that said, they should be able to have a little bit more success against Carolina, you would think. And not to minimize the skill and the ability that Svechnikov, Teräväinen, and Aho have, if that is indeed the top line that they roll with for Carolina. But I would say the way that the Bruins' top group came around towards the end should be promising. I'm not totally convinced, at least on the offensive end, but I'm not absolutely discouraged.
Makes sense. Anything else from that Columbus series you want to touch on? I don't really.
Yeah, not that.
Feels like forever ago.
It really does. Yeah. 3 days?
Yeah, it was. The Bruins stepped up. I think. Oh, that is one thing I did want to mention, or just give them credit for. The resiliency is becoming a pretty noticeable hallmark of this team. It's something that they had to deal with all season. With Cassidy mentioned it Wednesday, where he just starts. They're talking about it again. They're gonna have to face some adversity in Game 1 without Charlie McAvoy, where he's like, it's not totally unfamiliar to us. Like we lost Chára for a stretch. We lost Pastrnak. We lost Bergeron, we lost McAvoy. We've done this all season. Right. And it's true. They weathered the storm to get that second seed in the division. Coming up short of just one of the best regular season teams we've ever seen. And now into the playoffs, it feels like, there's been 3 or 4 plays or calls that haven't gone their way, correctly or incorrectly, that they could have folded and they didn't. And that's been, and they've been down in each series. They've had to go on the road and win. Not must-win games, but as close to must-win games as you could have. They've had them, and they've had them pretty decisively. It's been really impressive.
They were down 2-1 against Columbus and rattled off 3 straight wins.
Yeah, dominant in 2 of the 3 at least.
Right. So and that's not to people who follow the team closely. That's, you don't necessarily recognize in the moment. It's like, geez, this really is a resilient group. But then when you reflect on it, it's like, crap, they really were. And it's not unfamiliar territory for them, as you had mentioned. So, yeah, I'm trying to still figure out how much stock I put into that going against a Carolina team that was looking like it was going to be sellers at the trade deadline.
Right.
Because that is a resilient bunch too, and that's a group that they were down in their series against Washington, and they won that Game 7 on the road.
They were down coming off an ugly loss too.
Right. So, yeah, while it's been a nice calling card for the Bruins this year too, I don't think you can entirely dismiss what Carolina's done, but in some senses it was the same thing with the Blue Jackets. They looked like they were going to be sellers, and they decided, like, you know what, Panarin's going to walk, Bobrovsky's going to walk. We might as well try and make this work one last time. But yeah, nevertheless, I mean, still some impressive resolve from the Bruins.
All right, let's talk about the Bruins and the Hurricanes in the Eastern Conference Final. Hopefully we can all avoid the inclination or desire to refer to them as the Whalers. I'm already sick of it.
I am so tired of that. The Whaler-Canes thing bugs the bejesus out of me.
We get it. Yeah, it happened. Vegas has the Bruins as short favorite. Actually, Bruins are minus 150 to win the series. Carolina plus 130. Bruins took 2 out of 3 from Carolina this year. October 30th at their place, 3-2. Then they lost. That was the first Whalers game, December 23rd in Carolina, where the Bruins got a 5-3 final, but the Bruins got blitzed.
That was an ugly game for Rask, too. Didn't Aho have a hat trick that game?
I think so.
Yeah.
And then the other Whalers game was more recent, March 5th. Bruins won 4-3 in overtime. That game was in Boston. So the story for me with Carolina is just how good they've been really since, January 1st, if you want to use that as a natural breaking point. They went 30-12-2 down the stretch after New Year's Day. Like I said, St. Louis and Tampa were the only ones who had more points during that time. Only Tampa scored more goals, and they were 11th in goals against over that time. So, really, their power play was 8th. It's just hallmarks of they were one of the best teams in hockey for, 4 months? And then now into the playoffs. They've won 29 of their last 41 games, including the playoffs. They've just been really good.
Yeah, and it's funny because I see a lot of the Vegas Golden Knights in this team, the Vegas Golden Knights of last year, where I don't want to totally call it an island of misfit toys, but you have a lot of guys that didn't necessarily work out in other places, whether that's Dougie Hamilton or even Michael Furland. And teams like that just during the postseason have a weird thing about being able to come together and start really steamrolling teams. And it's just that top line of Svechnikov, Teräväinen, and Aho is just so much fun to watch. And Bruins saw firsthand how good, particularly the Aho-Teräväinen combination is. And so they're going to have their hands full. And so it's just, I don't think anybody saw it coming that Carolina would be where they are now, but I think in hindsight, especially after seeing the run they put together the last few months of the regular season, we shouldn't be totally surprised. I mean, there's an insane amount of skill.
Yep. It's like you said, and I'm with you as I really started to dig into stuff. Like, I think this is going to look a lot more like the Toronto series, where it's, the Hurricanes aren't very physical, for better or worse. I'm not using that as a knock, just pointing it out. Like, they had 7th fewest penalty minutes per game. Only 3 teams had fewer majors, which, again, fighting, not a big deal in the playoffs, but it just shows you it's not a team that was going out looking for a fight every night.
Right.
So that's, I think the Bruins are tougher for what that's worth, but it doesn't mean a whole lot if you can't catch what you're trying to hit.
Well, and that was one of the big knocks against Dougie Hamilton, right? Was his fear of playing in small areas and whatnot. But yeah, and I would not be surprised to see Bruce Cassidy, sick David Backes and guys like that, and just trying from game 1 just throw bodies.
Yeah,
and
I think
trying to demoralize them that way, because there are only so many skill guys you can match up with them.
Yep.
But physically you have the advantage.
Definitely.
So he should absolutely be employing that mindset at least for game 1.
It's going to be interesting. I think Backes has played really well.
He has,
since he's drawn into
found
the
a
lineup.
nice home on that second line,
and it's worked well. And he's doing the things that they were struggling to do. And I thought that was one interesting thing from the Columbus series, where Cassidy was very honest, very forthcoming about what they saw in Bobrovsky. They started to crack him, where it's they were putting more shots on from distance. They had any open look, they were putting it on because he was a little loose with rebounds in front, especially on shots from distance. And Backes fills that role perfectly, going to the net to clean up whatever. Saw it in Game 6 where he scored the goal. So he's done really well. He's just the entire season he's done what's been asked of him, and you can't knock him for really anything other than that. But I also feel like maybe this is a series where he looks up in Game 3 or 4. It's like he's the guy who comes out because they just don't have the speed.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Right. And that if the Bruins find themselves in that position where it's like, man, they're just skating circles around us.
It just feels like that's such an obvious
Yeah, and with regards to Backes' play, I think it would get more positive attention if he did not have the contract attached to him that he does. Because he's done exactly what he's been told all season, and it's led to him getting healthy scratched a few times, including during the playoffs. He's been fine. That's why I think it's important, especially for guys like David Backes, to play heavy right away and try and at least make your mark that way, because if that doesn't work, then you're coming out.
Yeah, and I think the physical thing is going to be huge for the Bruins, especially getting in on the forecheck, because it's going to be hard to control a puck in this series. Because Carolina, I was looking it up, they had the best shots allowed difference in the NHL this season.
Really?
They only allowed, I had to triple check my math. They only allowed 35.5 shots per game. Shots attempted per game.
Yeah.
That's insane. The Bruins, you think, are a pretty decent defensive team, pretty good with puck possession. They allowed 44 shots. So there's a 9-10 shot difference there.
Right.
Shot attempt difference, I should say. They get pucks on net, whatever, all of that. So they're used to playing with the puck. I think maybe that has something to do with the physical stuff as well. You don't need to be physical if you have the puck.
Their defense hasn't gotten nearly enough attention.
Yeah.
But they do not have a single guy over the age of 27. Mm-hmm. But almost all of them have been around forever.
That's a good point,
Dougie Hamilton's played in a cup final. Justin Falk was an all-star a few years ago. Calvin DeHaan had some runs with the Islanders. And Jacob Slavin, I think he's only 25. But he's also, Patrice Bergeron was praising him. This is an incredibly talented defense. But I think because a guy like Dougie Hamilton is the biggest name, it won't exactly get the praise that it necessarily deserves. And I think that's going to be something that will probably shock a lot of casual observers. It's like, oh, wow, this defense actually has some talent, even though I recognize few of these names.
Yeah, Slavin's 26.5 minutes in the first, or through the playoffs so far, actually leads the team in points. It's just 11 assists.
Yeah, well, and truthfully, when I was writing the series preview for NESN.com, I was thinking right out of the show, it's like, okay, Bruins are going to have the advantage on defense. And then I was like, they're not even going to have the advantage in Game 1 with McAvoy out. And it's like, and then it's a push pretty much every other time. But, it's a good group.
If you're looking for some very obvious areas of advantage for the Bruins, I think you turn to special teams. I think they have a clear advantage when it comes to the power play. The Bruins' power play has been really good for the majority of the season, most of the playoffs. They went a little quiet there for a while in the Columbus series, but they still have the top-ranked power play left in the playoffs. They're clicking at a 29% rate right now. To put that in perspective, Carolina's converted on just 10.5% of its power plays so far this the playoffs, and they're only killing off 3 out of 4. Carolina is, so the Bruins have a clear advantage there, and they also have the advantage in goaltending. I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, and that's not to say that Peter Mrazek and Curtis McElhinney haven't been good, but they both were longtime backups for a reason.
Yep.
And so I think if the Bruins take that approach that they took late in the Columbus series, where it's like, let's just try and get pucks to the net, let's just try and shoot and see what happens, they could eventually, start to crack those guys a little bit. I don't know how much stock I want to put in to the power play, or not so much penalty kill numbers, but Columbus's power play during the regular season was not that good. But at times they made the Bruins, push them to the brink a little bit. And then meanwhile, and the Bruins sorted this out a little bit in the final few games, but all the shorthanded chances the Bruins gave up, sort of takes away from what the power play was able to do.
True.
Because there were, for the success that they did have, there are also slews of, shorthanded looks that they gave up. That said, I would still agree with you, though, that as a whole, the Bruins have the advantage in special teams, and the goaltending by a mile, I think, is better, especially with the way Rask is playing.
I'd be surprised. I mean, things could always turn, especially with the top 6 talent that Carolina has with their own power play. It doesn't feel like a series where you're going to be burned, when you're down a man, which maybe is an encouraging thing for a Bruins team that might want to get a little more physical, whether you take a penalty here or there. Yeah. If you feel confident being able to, kill the penalty, or you're not walking on eggshells as much, maybe that allows you to kind of open up your physical game too. So something to keep in mind. All right, you want to do what we did last round, kind of just run through each facet of the game and make our do a tail of the tape, as they say in the business.
Let's do it.
All right, let's start with up front forward lines. Bruins, we've talked ad nauseum. You mentioned that top line of Carolina as well. Not a whole lot of major injuries on either side. Yeah. So who you got, Carolina or Bruins forward pair?
I have
groups.
Bruins narrowly,
yeah.
And part of that's because I think the fourth line for the Bruins has really figured it out. There were a couple, they've been good pretty much all year, but there were times during both the Toronto and Columbus series where they looked a little lost, but that wasn't the case late in the Columbus series, and so I think that can actually kind of be a difference maker. And with the first line for the Bruins sort of hitting its stride, it appears, late in the Columbus round, I think the Bruins have a slight advantage.
I will say they have a bigger advantage than you're saying. I don't want to undersell Carolina, and I'm not going to sit here and say I've watched a ton of Carolina hockey this year. But, yeah, I think that Bruins first line, at least the ceiling, is so much higher than even anything Carolina can roll out there.
Yeah.
You look at the way David Krejčí is playing right now. He's back to being playoff David Krejčí. So you need a big play, a big shift. He's going to give it to you. Love what they've done. Love the third line. Coyle continues to be a monster. Like, he's been one of the more underrated players, and as you mentioned, the fourth line starting to put it all together.
Yeah.
So even I think my saying that they have a pretty clear advantage there has more to do with just how good the Bruins have been lately than anything Carolina.
And Charlie Coyle's just been a tremendous X factor for the Bruins.
Yeah, I'm not trying to I'm not meaning to undersell Carolina. I just say I'm that impressed with the Bruins lately. So the fact that it's just, look at the depth. We've gone this long without seeing a whole lot from that first line until recently. The fact that the Bruins are here, so it's credit to them. All right, defensemen, D pairs.
When McAvoy comes back, Bruins, so I'd say over the course of an entire series, it would be the Bruins. Hurricanes' defense is good. I think people, as I mentioned earlier, will be surprised with how talented they are. The Bruins are just playing so well. And what Matt Grzelcyk has done has not gotten nearly enough attention. He is so responsible with the puck and clearing his own zone. I had seen a chart the other day, too, that showed that he was one of the best defensemen in the league at clearing the zone. It's just he hasn't made a ton of mistakes, and he is playing on a third pairing. I've given Brandon Carlo a lot of crap. I still think that people overvalue him. However, he has been very good this postseason. That play he made on Panarin in Game 5 was a very mature play and literally a game-saving play. And McAvoy, I feel like this has sort of been his coming out party a little bit, where people are starting to realize, wow, he will actually be an elite defenseman for a long time. So I'll go Bruins.
I'm gonna go. I want to say push. I'm gonna say push. I think it's a push because I think
it's safe.
Yeah, and if it's I guess that's a cop out. But if you want to sit here and say that Carolina has a bit of team speed. As forwards, we've seen give them problems at times so far in this season. Small sample size, I know, but for as great as the Bruins defense has looked at times, especially in that Carolina series, they've also looked a little slow. Chára especially, I think.
Yeah, Chára hasn't been great,
which isn't saying much, but again, it's one of those things where you got to consider it. Krug has been. When he's been good, he's been awesome, but at times he's looked a little lost, especially in his own zone. And I think some of that was coming back from the injury as well. But he's, like I said, he's been better, but it's still something to consider. And again, he's got a guy like Connor Clifton back there, as good as he's been. Still young, it's still.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a little bit when we did our 30-minute breakdown of whatever goal that was, where Clifton, it was the Duchesne goal, right?
Yeah.
Where Clifton slipped or whatever happened. I think Connor Clifton's going to be a great NHL defenseman one day on some team's third pairing. It might be the Bruins. I would so much rather see John Moore playing on his offside right now with Grzelcyk than have Clifton in. That's just me. And I think it's a travesty that they might start Steven Kampfer
I was going to say, you're probably not
tonight.
happy about the Kampfer.
Steven Kampfer's he's proven to be a good shooter, which is weird. I think he had a goal in one of the Carolina games, actually, now that I think about it. He can snipe for some reason, but if the logic is anything beyond he's a right shot and we want a right shot playing with a left shot.
It's not even just to put him with the left shot, it's to give them more flexibility. Like Cassidy talked about this Wednesday where he's like, what we start with probably isn't what we're going to end with. Right. And I think putting the right shot in there and having 3 left and 3 right just allows you to do more things. Yeah,
and I'm not totally convinced. I'm not sure if you heard what Sweeney was saying about John Moore, but he was like, he's available, but some things have made it tough to get him in the lineup. It's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
He's either available without reservation or he isn't.
That caught my eye, too. That was kind of a weird...
So I'm not totally convinced that Moore's healthy. But in addition to that, I would rather see John Moore play and get 13 minutes than when Cassidy puts Kampfer in and gives him 8 or 9.
Yeah.
So it's just put somebody in that you're going to use.
Makes sense. All right, goalies. I think that's pretty clear.
Tuukka. Yeah.
He's been the best goalie in the playoffs so far.
Right.
So. Special teams. So we kind of touched on this too.
Yeah, we did. I'll call it a push because I have not been overjoyed with how the power play has been.
It's been real feast or famine.
Yeah, and the penalty killing has been better. They had a couple of really nice kills.
Still struggle to clear the puck. It's unbelievable.
Right, and Chára's reticence to just clear the puck has absolutely floored me. There have been so many times where he's standing there with the puck, like right next to the post.
He's so tall he doesn't realize he has the puck.
Yeah, that might be it.
Puck's there. I didn't see it.
He's been in the league for 2 decades, but he doesn't know when he has the puck at his stick. So I mean the Bruins have bent a little too much, and so I'll say it's a push.
Fair.
I also don't want to pick the Bruins for everything.
I understand. Well, if that's your opinion, you should not shy away from your opinion.
Yeah, true. I never do.
Yeah, I know. Coaching. Just a lot of jawline in this series.
Yeah, it's interesting too because neither of them have been around for a while. I think this is Cassidy's only his second full season. This is Brindamore's first.
They've been assistants forever. Brindamore has been on that staff forever. I didn't realize that, so I was looking it up the other day.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, if you go with experience, then I guess it would be Bruce Cassidy. But I'm
not gonna lie. I don't know enough about Rod Brindamore's.
I mean, he literally took a team and turned it around.
That's a good point.
So, I mean, you can't just totally ignore that.
I'm giving Cassidy the advantage, though. Like, it's just, he's pushing all the right buttons right now. It's hard to go against what he's been able to do. It's a slight advantage because I don't really know.
Yeah, I guess Brindamore outcoached Barry Trotz by a mile, but because I'm trying to think of, who the coaches that they faced. I mean, Cassidy had to beat Tortorella
and Babcock. That's pretty good, yeah.
So I'll go with Cassidy, just because I think he's been great. Isn't Brindamore up for the Jack Adams? Isn't he one of the finalists?
Makes sense. I'm not sure. I'm not going to sit here and say I know that, but it makes sense.
I think it's Trotz and Brindamore and somebody else. The Calgary coach. We're going off the rails here.
Yeah. All you can just hear is typing. No, it's Berube.
Oh, Berube, that's
Cooper
right.
and Trotz.
Yeah.
So you were.
Oh, that's right. I was way off.
1 for 3.
Yeah.
You
that's right, because it's stupid that John Cooper's up for it.
Yeah.
But whatever. That's neither here nor there.
Yep. And we're still talking about it.
Yeah. So I'll just pick Cassidy.
Okay. Your favorite intangibles.
Yeah. What the hell does that mean?
I think it's pretty obvious.
You know what? I'll give that to Carolina.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because I mean the resolve that they've shown, the fact that they're just the whole bunch of jerks thing, and the fact that they're fun to watch, and it's just because they play with a ton of energy, and so fine, Carolina.
Okay, give me your prediction.
Bruins in 6. I'm living with that one.
Okay.
I've been 2 for 2 so far.
I'm going Bruins in 5. because I've not been scared away by I don't regret my Bruins in 5 from the second round, and like I said, still feels like there's a short series in here somewhere, so I'm going to keep riding that until I get it. But I think Bruins in 6 probably is more likely. Or even 7. It's hard to say, especially without – there's not a ton of – it also feels like hopefully this turns into like the Tampa Bay series from 2011 where it was like – this is kind of a random matchup, and I know Tampa Bay was great that year, but it ended up being a classic series. I'm hoping it goes that way.
But. Was it 10 years ago that they met in the conference finals, Bruins and Hurricanes? Was that 2009?
2009, yeah. The Scott Walker incident.
Who could forget?
I went back and watched that yesterday. What just a dick move. God, and the guy ends up – there's like – it's one of those things where maybe the karma doesn't exist. Like for him to come back and score the game winner in Game 7 and on the road is just brutal. But Aaron Ward's made out pretty well since then. So.
Aaron Ward has been fine.
Yeah, good for him. All righty, let's get out of here. That's been the NESN Bruins podcast. We'll be back at some point. We'll play it by ear. If something big happens, we'll come in for an emergency pod. Otherwise, it'll be either reviewing the Eastern Conference Finals or previewing the Stanley Cup Final.
Yeah.
Wild.
Damn.
Close. So that's Logan. I'm Mike. We will talk to you again at some point in the near distant future. Goodbye.